Hello, beautiful people. My guest today is Mark Silverman, and I reached out to Mark to come onto the podcast because I knew that he is currently doing some of the things that I could see myself doing at his age. And he has his own podcast called Mastering Midlife, but he's also a best-selling author. He's an executive coach. And what attracted me to Mark was really his genuine and authentic expression of who he is. And that is something that he obviously has worked on in the past and it comes through in this conversation. So with all that being said, I really think you guys are going to enjoy this episode with Mark J. Silverman. And if you would like to give me feedback for this episode, you could do that at Hey Danny Miranda. And if you would like to finally make my day, you can go over to TuesdayTreasure.DannyMiranda.com/Tuesday to sign up for my free weekly newsletter where I give you the coolest things that I find every week into your inbox. All right, without further ado, this is my episode with Mark J. Silverman.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
First of all, thank you, Mark, for joining us today.
It's my pleasure. This is fun.
Yeah, so I want to give everyone a little bit of context for who you are and let everyone know what you have been up to in this world so far.
Oh my God. So far, my 5 or 6 different lives that I've had. The shtick I love to lead with, when I'm just trying to be funny is, at 27, I was homeless, living in my truck, drunk, drug addict. And, 6 years later, I was a millionaire, married, with kids on the way. Basically a short Jewish Tony Robbins. That's kind of the funny story. But the truth is, I was kind of not a going concern through my 20s, like you and a lot of your listeners and Tej and, that group on Twitter where I found you. I was basically drinking, drugging, and having sex and not thinking about anything past 30. So when I got sober, came to Washington, D.C., take some money from my brother and get my act together. And I realized, after listening to Tej's interview, and I realized I can swear on this podcast.
Yes.
When I finally when I started to get my shit together, getting married, having kids, having responsibilities, that was another new, very cool chapter in my life. Learning to grow up, learning to be a man, learning to be a father and a husband, and then screwing all that up. And then in my late 40s, really crashing and burning with my health, and my wife and I separated, and my business, just went to crap, and finding myself again at 47, and this last 10-year, 11-year, 12-year journey to now has been me building back something completely different from all those experiences.
Sounds like you've been on a roller coaster, is what it sounds like, or just a straight up roller coaster ride.
I have always been on a roller coaster.
Well, it sounds like you're on the up and up now, so that's great to hear. And the first thing, I definitely want to get into all those stories because there's definitely so much there for people listening. But when I saw your bio, the first thing that popped out to me is you're a leadership resiliency expert. And I was so curious, what does that mean exactly?
So that that's all marketing. Like I'm an executive coach, I'm an author, I'm a podcaster, I'm a leadership resiliency guy. So for me, resiliency is so let's talk about a definition of wealth that I heard recently that was really cool. The new definition of wealth for me was what's left when all the money is gone. So when we started to dig into that, what's left when all the money is gone is your resources, your community, your personal capital, your relationships, and maybe some investments, maybe buildings, maybe that kind of stuff. But what is going to have you bounce back if you lost all your money? So resilience for me is when I was training for the marathon, I ran the Marine Corps marathon when I was 47. I wanted to get my health back. I wanted to turn things around. I had injury after injury after that. And the only way to stay in the game was to bring myself back from injury. The only way to bring myself back in life when I stumbled was to, fall down 7, get up 8. So for me, I'm trying to teach the people who have grown up in the hustle and grind culture, the Gary Vaynerchuk, the Grant Cardone, the, burn both candles at both ends. I was in tech startups since 2000. And the badge of honor was being so busy, and broken marriages and drug addiction and alcoholism and cheating and all that stuff. I want to show people that they can be successful differently, and they can be resilient, and they can have relationships, and they can actually have full lives and still be in the 1%.
That sounds amazing. So let's say someone comes up to you and they're like, "Listen, I'm burned out. I've been working so hard. What do I do?" And so what's your first step for them, for that person?
My first step is always to teach people to breathe. My first, that was something, I'm a New York Jew. And the joke when in the men's circles, when I first started getting into this personal development work, was that New York Jews live from the neck up, right? I didn't even know I had a body, right? So when I was taught, what do you feel, Mark? Well, I think this. When I was taught what feelings were, sad, mad, glad, use those words. When I was taught that I could feel things in my body, when I was taught to breathe past my chest, breathe down into my belly, that changed everything. And now what I tell people is, almost everybody, especially during the coronavirus, during racial unrest, and I'm pretty sure since 9/11, we've all been walking around in a little bit of fight or flight. Most of us are breathing shallow. Most of us are a little scared. So our creativity, our connectivity is limited because we can only run, hide, right, or fight. And so getting people to breathe and getting them into their bellies gets them out of their heads, and now they can start to look at their lives more creatively.
So were you always someone who was open to the possibility of the breath being your source of comfort? Because I can imagine, knowing a lot of New York Jews and being one myself, half Jewish here, is the idea that, a lot of people are uncomfortable with the idea of the breath being something that could actually help them. Were you uncomfortable with that idea?
Of course, I didn't know. I didn't know what breathing was. That was a completely new concept to me. So take some deep breaths, and I'd be like in my chest, and I have no idea how to do it. And it's funny because I've taught people to meditate, and I've taught people to breathe 1 minute at a time. My men's group, way back a decade ago, when I started learning this, I taught them the 1 minute meditation. Oh, just meditate for 1 minute a day, just 1 minute, 60 seconds. I have a new client who's a vice president at a financial firm in New York, and he's brilliant but so much nervous energy. His homework, and people pay me a lot of money for my services, his homework was to sit still and breathe for 1 minute a day. And you could see the panic on his face. Like, really? That's what you're asking me to do? I'm not sure I can do that. I'm like, can you just sit for 1 minute a day? Does he mean meditate? I'm like, don't even meditate. Just sit for 1 minute a day. No phone, no nothing. And then the next week it was, now can you sit and breathe? I want to take you to the next level. Either sit and do nothing for 2 minutes, or sit for 1 minute and really breathe from your belly. And he took yoga, so he knew how to breathe from his belly. And it's a game changer. It just changes everything.
What does your breathing or meditation practice look like?
My meditation practice changes from week to week. What's non-negotiable for me is I get up at 5:30 in the morning, and from 5:30 to 7 is basically my time. I grab my coffee, I get on the floor of my office, I read, I'll watch a video of someone who's kind of profound. The other day I just read one of Tej's newsletters, and then I journal and I meditate for about an hour and a half every single day. Sometimes it's Zazen meditation on the cushion. Sometimes it's doodling, right? Sometimes it's a guided meditation. I like to change it up. I don't really want to get into a religion for my practice. I like to change it up, but I make sure that I have my contemplation time.
Why do you think that our society as a whole hasn't accepted the importance of having time for yourself? Do you think it's just because we're so busy, we're always trying to create the next thing, build value, build, so it doesn't allow us time for ourselves? What do you think about that?
Well, we can dive into human nature and kind of the way we're built. We're sugar addicts. Our bodies react to that. When I watch baseball with my sons, I look at all the commercials, and the commercials are half car commercials. Be sexy, be something in this particular car, and the other half are fake food commercials. They're fast food restaurants. They're instant food. So we are, as a culture, are so geared towards the sugar high. That one of the 10 truths in my book that keep you in overwhelm is that the hustle and grind culture that Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone and Money Twitter throws out there is just a sugar high for the ego. It's just, this is what we get attracted to. It's so much more interesting to be busy, to be driven, to be in competition. It's so much more interesting than to be alone with ourselves. Who wants to have feelings? Who wants to think about what's going on in the world and what my place in it is? Who wants to think about mortality? Who wants to think about their relationship and where they're not honest with each other? Who wants to do those things?
Do you think when we ask ourselves these tough questions, something good comes out of it on the other side?
Something exquisite comes out on the other side. For me, one of the reasons I'm so maniacal about all this is because I'm not a naturally happy person. I'm not a naturally Zen-centered person. In fact, I'm not even a naturally competent person. Left to my own devices, I'm usually living in my own, in a car and not able to do anything productive. But I will tell you that most of my day is spent in joy and connection. I'll step out of the shower and be getting dressed and just wonder, why am I so blessed and so happy? And I have challenges. I have things that are bothering me. I'll wake up grumpy, and then an hour later, I'm like, oh my God, I just love life. I spend most of my time in joy and love and connection and feeling safe, which when I was younger, never felt safe.
When you've gone on this journey, were you forced to look deep within yourself about yourself at 27 or yourself as a child? And if so, what did that lead you? Where did that take you mentally? And what type of things did you have to ask yourself to uncover some issues?
So first I had to, that's for anybody who does any of their own internal work, to look back at your childhood and the horrors. Some people don't have horrors. They have they have other things. I had horrors for myself, being molested, the drinking, the drugging, some of the things that people said to me about me that I believed and stuck with, and then going through my 20s and really the way I damaged myself, going back and looking at those things were really tough. Then, and then as I got older, looking at myself today, looking at where I lie, looking at my part and why my marriage fell apart, looking at how I am as a dad, looking at my own integrity, taking responsibility for everything in my life, good, bad, and indifferent. And finally, taking 100% responsibility is a complete game changer. It's a little scary at first, but then it's empowering. But then what I needed to do was go back to my childhood and to all these things that were back then. And not only don't I really know what happened, I only know what I think happened and then what I believe about what happened. So now dealing with what I believe happened to me as a child and the decisions I made now. So one of the decisions I was just at a workshop where we were talking about limiting beliefs, and I was ostracized a lot as a kid and beat up, and there was some really bad stuff that happened. And I made the decision that if I wasn't accepted, I'm not safe. So part of what I do for a living is public. So I'm, like on this podcast, I'm being raw, I'm being really real. I'm afraid of not being accepted. Mm-hmm. So I put stuff out that's a little safe and not my what I really have to say. And what I learned is, it's dangerous for me because if I'm rejected, it's going to be dangerous. So I was gating my own success. Now I've worked with that. Now I'm cool. Like I'm going to say what I need to say. I'm going to tell what I need to say. I'm going to make fun of Grant Cardone and Gary Vaynerchuk to all your people. And I don't give a shit. People are dying. People are dying and I'm tired of it.
It's real deep stuff. It really is. Because when you...
Why does everybody say that to me? Every time I have a conversation, people are like, God damn, that's deep.
No, I don't say it in a bad way or a negative way at all. Because it's the things that I think about often in terms of asking yourself the questions that are the difficult ones, that are the internal struggles. But I want to change gears and talk about yourself at 25 and talk about yourself, in 27. What got you to the place to be at 33 where you seemingly, quote unquote, had it all in terms of your family and your monetary success? What took you from 27 to 33? Let's dive into that, because I would be upset if I didn't hear this story of yours.
So we'll go back a little bit. I might as well get really real. So when I was in my early 20s, I was a complete drunk and drug addict and sex addict and just a complete mess. I had a lot of fun, but it didn't end well. And then I got into, if people, older people will remember, there was this thing called EST in the 70s, Earhart Sensitivity Training. It's what Landmark comes out of and a bunch of stuff that people do now. But it was a self-help kind of culty, had a lot of good, had a lot of dark. So I was part of that. I got involved with a group that was an offspring of that. That was kind of culty, but also saved my life, because I probably would have been dead had I not met these people. So I spent a couple of years there kind of learning how to have a real life, and then realizing that I can't drink anymore. I got thrown out of that community and was living in my truck, and my brother was here in Washington, D.C., and he said, "Why don't you come here and get some money?" So I drove across country in my pickup truck that kept stalling, and I had no money. All I had was a Unicall 76 credit card. So I stopped at Unicall 76 stations, gas stations, and got food, and got here. And my brother said, "Well, if you're going to stay here, you're going to go to school, you're going to go to AA, and you're going to go to NA, and you'll live with me for a year." So I went to AA meetings and NA meetings every day, and I got sober. And I went to the gym, and I started running, and I was taking college classes. And, so that was the shift. I'm kind of an all or nothing guy. If I'm going to be a drug addict, I'm going to be a drug addict. If I'm going to be a student, now in my late 20s, I got straight A's and did really, really well. So for years, I was just maniacally focused on being perfect, of making up for all the fuck ups that I had done. And one person actually said to me, "I've never seen someone with such clean T-shirts and clean white sneakers." It was because I was doing everything I can to be absolutely perfect. So my ex-wife once said to me, my book is called Only Tens, and she said, "Mark, you're a 10 you were a 10 as a husband, a 10 as an ex-husband, a 10 as a father, a 10 as a son, a 10 as a brother, a 10 as a worker." She says, "How do you that's, you can't keep that up." And that's kind of how I tried to live my life. Because again, I wanted to cover up all the crap that was inside, all the darkness that was inside by being perfect. But that helped. Again, the hustle and grind culture helps. If you listen to anybody who's been maniacally famous, like Howard Stern, they'll talk about how that was the only thing on their mind. And for me, the only thing on my mind was staying sober, being a good husband, being a good father. What happened was I fell into sales, and I felt like I had no skills. And I was really, really shy and very, very introverted. But something happened when I hit sales, and I was really successful. So I doubled my income the first year I was in sales. I doubled my income again the second year. I doubled my income again the third year. I doubled my income again the fourth year. Now I was making serious money, driving a Lexus convertible, living in $1 million house, right? Wearing Hugo Boss suits. So that for me was really surreal, raising my kids in an affluent neighborhood, which was, not what I knew at all. So that was kind of the journey there, but staying sober and being maniacally focused on being as perfect as I could possibly be.
It sounds like you were able to transform yourself, and it sounds like your brother was the key step to building that first step of cutting the addictions. And it's so funny because you see someone who is in such a bad spot, but the thing that I've noticed, and from my experience, my brief experience on this earth, has been that someone who is in a really negative cycle can turn that into a really positive cycle. And it's something that I've seen in my own life. It's something that I've seen on guests on this podcast. And it's so interesting seeing it in you as well.
Well, when you're all in, like, I'm all in on whatever I do. So I'm all in on being bad. If I'll be all in on being good. But that was also killing me. My ex-wife she's a very insightful person. And she said, when people walk into a room, half the people are going to like you, half the people are not going to like you, except for Mark. Mark's going to walk into a room and everybody's going to like him. And that was by design, right? I twist myself into a pretzel to make sure that everybody likes me. Not anymore. Now people think I'm an asshole, which is really good.
That's growth for you.
But, back then that people pleasing was ridiculous.
Why you were just such a people pleaser because you wanted to be accepted? Is that right?
I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to make up for what I felt was just completely trashing a life. I didn't want people to see the darkness that was in me, because I still wanted to go to Las Vegas and, die in the heart, in the arms of a hooker with a heart of gold, drunk. And I still wanted that, even though I was living, such a good life. So I didn't want anybody to see that underbelly. So I just tried to maintain a very, very perfect outside. Mm.
Well, let's switch gears now and talk about your book, Only Tens. Why did you write this book?
I wrote this book because we took my son to get tested for ADD. He was having trouble in school. And I was about 40 at the time. And the doctor had tested the entire family just so he wouldn't feel picked on. And the doctor said, who in the family is off the charts? I don't even know how they function ADD. And I looked at my ex-wife and the doctor said, Dad, like, you're so off the charts, ADD. I don't even know how you function. And I'm like, holy shit, that's what's wrong. So she sent me to a psychiatrist, and he said, I said, I don't know if I'm ADD. How would you know? He goes, 2 ways. 1, you'll take the pill. If you take the pill and you can think, you're ADD. And 2, I've been doing this for 30 years, and if you're not ADD, I'll eat my hat. So he says, you couldn't keep your eyes on me the whole time we were here. So I took the pill, and oh my God, I could think. But fast forward several years later, now I'm an executive coach. I've left the tech industry, and I'm coaching, and I'm talking to my coach, and I said, look, I've really focused things down to just a few things, but I'm still not I don't know why I can't fucking get anything done. And he says, Mark, he says, what if you used your distraction as a compass instead of a problem? And I said, well, I'll be living under a bridge and my kids would starve and it would be horrible. He goes, well, I really don't believe that you don't finish anything. If I remember, you ran the Marine Corps Marathon. I'm like, yeah, I did that. He says, if I remember, when you were down and out and sick, you said you wanted to make $1 million in a year. And you did. And I said, yeah, I did that. He goes, so it's not fucking true that you don't finish things, you don't accomplish things. He says, you only do what you want to do, and you don't do what you don't want to do. And I was like, holy shit. What I realized is that if I want to do something, nothing stops me. Nothing stops me. I am pretty fucking brilliant if I want to do something. If I don't want to do something, it doesn't get done. Now, the big trick was, where do I lie to myself and say I want to do something, but I really don't? And that's where these qualifiers and all this stuff. So I decided I wanted to get myself a PhD in in really being honest with myself and doing the things I really want to do. And so I said I was going to write a book. And my coach said, Mark, I think maybe it's a pamphlet, maybe a little PDF, but not really a book. I said, fuck it, I'm writing a book. So I wrote the book, and it sold like 60,000 copies. It was riddled with grammatical errors and spelling issues and stuff like that. It's all fixed now. But it was me getting a PhD and being honest with myself, being honest with other people, learning to set boundaries, learning that I will do a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10, but an 8 or a 9 will look like I really want to do it, but I won't get it done. And to learn the difference, like a 4 or a 5, that's easy. All right, I'm not going to do that. But when you get a 9 and it feels like you really should do it and it's a really good idea, or the people really want you to do it, but you don't want to do it, it ain't going to get fucking done. So I started to learn to tell the truth to myself. And so what I realized with redoing the book, and I redid the book at 2.0 this past September, is that all these self-help, all these time management programs like Getting Things Done and Franklin Planners and all this stuff, they're all great systems. But until we stop lying to ourselves, we're not gonna keep them up. We're just going to go to time management class after time management class, hack after hack after hack, until we get honest with ourselves. Once we're honest with ourselves, then we know where we can point the
It
arrow.
reminds me of Derek Sivers's hell yes or no type dichotomy, where you said,
this is stolen completely from Derek Sivers, because that's what my coach said way back when. He says, Mark, it's either a hell yes or a hell no, Derek Sivers. So only 10s, a 10 or not. It comes direct. So if Derek ever listens to this, dude, I stole it.
Well, I'll be sending him this podcast after it's published because he replies to every email. But yeah, Derek Sivers, hell yeah or no. I'll link that in the show notes because it's really an incredible blog post and it's an incredible idea. And it sounds like only 10s is the same type of concept. And it really is so true, right? For life, it's just like, only do things you really, really want to do and are all in on. So my question then is...
So let me just interrupt you right there because I want to say something. The reason I think only 10s resonates is because everybody knows it's a really good idea to only do hell yeses, but nobody really talks about the internal struggle and the self-esteem that you need to be able to set a boundary to only do a hell yes, to walk away from a hell no. Like that internal struggle is where the mess is. And so people who actually can go, yes, I'm going to go do a hell yes. And they're just going to go do whatever James Clear says to do, or whatever these people say to do. They don't need my book. It's the people who read James Clear and don't start the habit that they say they want. It's the ones who say, oh, I'm only going to do hell yeses, but never follow through for themselves. And I work with that part. I can't help perfect people anymore. I can only help people who are fucking up like me, so that they can do things they never thought they could do.
I think that's such an important point, because if you don't know yourself, then you'll just say hell yes to anything. And if you don't know what battles are going on in your mind and you don't understand how your mind works, it's going to be very difficult for you to see something and be like, oh, I need to jump on this opportunity. You might start it and then stop it because you don't know yourself. You haven't fought those battles with yourself, and I think that's such an important point that you bring up. So
I got to say, so this is where I before you hit record, I told you I was going to compliment you. One of the things I loved your conversation with Tej in podcast number 1. One, I loved your enthusiasm and you just got your guileless interest in the subject. And I know you've known him for a while, but just in the conversation, but also, your generation and the guys who are attracted to you are looking to do what Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone were getting the last generation to do, but now sanely, not sacrifice life for the almighty success. So I'm seeing this intelligence come into the conversation of the hustle and grind that is so much safer, so much saner than what I saw 5 years ago. So I'm really appreciative of the way you go about it.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and it's interesting because Gary Vaynerchuk has been one of my inspirations and role models for a long time, but it's really interesting to see how his message has changed over the years. In 2000,
yeah, he's getting old.
In 2010, it was more like, shut up and work. Like, you need to work harder, you need to work longer. And now you see his message is more love, kindness, optimism, patience. It's the same idea, but it's expressed slightly differently. And it's a pleasure to see the growth from Gary and his message there as well.
I watched the growth. There's a bunch of people, Mark Manson, who wrote,
The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck.
Yeah, right. Like I'm watching the maturity. Tucker Max, who was on my podcast, I'm just watching a lot of people finally actually growing and seeing. But in your 20s and early 30s, that's when you're supposed to be balls to the wall, and nobody can teach you anything. That's when you're a warrior and you're going out and figuring things out. But then at some point, either life does it or something internal where you can mellow and start to get more wise.
Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting because when I first graduated college, I was like, money at all costs, money's the most important thing. And it's like a couple years later, all I'm thinking is like love is the most important thing. And, who knows, that might change as time goes on, but it's just like the truth, me expressing my truth in this moment is all I can do. Right. So
that's all you can do. That wherever your vibe is where you are.
So you mentioned your podcast, and I'd love to know about, as a new podcaster myself, what are some lessons you've learned from publishing 249 podcasts at the time of this recording?
250 on Friday. What are the lessons learned? One, turn the mic on and do it. Two, interview who you're interested in. So, I have not had some more famous people on the podcast because I'm really bored with people who are just doing their shtick and selling their thing. I like to talk to real people who have had the hero's journey. So I say talk to people who you're interested in, and it'll come out as genuine. Turn them up. Just do it. Like fire, ready, aim is what I teach all my clients. Just turn on the mic and publish your podcast.
Makes sense. It's like when you just start, you don't know what to expect, but my guiding compass is just what you said, which is just talk to people who are interesting, and hopefully the audience will as well, but let the conversation be the reward in and of itself.
Yeah. And for me, before if I have guests on who are somewhat famous, and are pushing a book or pushing an idea or something like that, I have a conversation with them beforehand, and I tell them, don't come on the podcast if you're not willing to share your own journey, if you're not willing to be a human talking to another human. There are other podcasts where experts can shine. Here's where we're talking to one person who you may change their life, save their marriage, right? Save their finances. So I really prep them to be real. And so far, it's been really kind of amazing.
Have you ever had to scrap a podcast because the guest was putting on a facade?
Yes. No, but because he just turned out to be crazy. I had a guy who was a health expert, a naturopath doctor, and I really, I loved what he had to say about hormones for men, talking about entrepreneurs in their 40s and 50s, how we need testosterone if we want to compete. And he just started making all kinds of sense. So he was on my podcast, and then he just started talking about his right-wing views. He started talking about the riots and how we would shoot them in Texas. And then he started making fun of Joe Biden, and it just got, and I kept thinking, all right, there's some gold here in the middle, and I can cut this out and I can cut that out. And it wasn't even about specifically his political leaning, because I don't, I'm not conservatives, or I'm real close to conservatives. I'm not worried about that, but he was just nuts. And by the time the podcast ended, I looked him up and I saw the headlines of what a right-wing, radical, violent man he is. And I just said, I'm not going to publish. I'm not even going to edit it and publish it. And then the people, his agent called and said, when are you going to publish the podcast? And I said, yeah. This is not, calling for violence against peaceful protesters, to me, just doesn't jive with my vibe.
I've been super curious about that, about people having to cut podcasts and stuff like that, because so far so good. Hopefully you're not the first one, Mark.
Yeah, no, it was, and he said, I like you, Silverman. I really like you, and I'm going to send you my books and all that. I'm like, I don't really think you like me. In fact, I'm pretty sure you're not going to like me
when I don't publish this. But okay, going back to your book, I want to know, what was the best marketing channel for your book, just as a curious future author, hopefully in the future?
So the number one thing that helped. So one, if you want to study publishing a book, study James Clear, because you're actually on that trajectory. What James Clear did that I see a lot of people doing now was he provided value for years. You go back to his tweets, and his entire book is in those tweets. Value, 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 right? So he built an audience who was hungry for this book. So when they published it, he already had an audience to sell to. So like with the podcast, so Mastering Midlife, the book is going to come out. And I've done really no self-promotion. I've done no self-promotion for the podcast, no self-promotion for the book. I'm grateful for the success I've had. But now, my marketing people are like, okay, we're building the mailing list. We're building the community to sell the next book into. So that's first. Then the second thing is I tell all new authors, especially since most of us self-publish now, is get a launch team together. Get a bunch of your friends. What you need for Amazon is you need 25 good reviews for them to start promoting it and start to putting it on list and pick it up. So get a bunch of people to read the advanced copy of the book. Send them a form where they write out their review, right? And tell them to review the book and write it out and send it back to you. Then on the day that it's published, you send them back their review with the instructions on how to put down a review, so that you get 25 or 30 reviews the first week you have your book out. So that for me was really helpful in getting Only Tens just launched for the first week. So the first week it sold 1,500 copies, right? Then it's on the book's merits. Because if it's not a good book, it's not gonna keep selling. But I wanted to give it that jump start. So I had 25 reviews in the first week. Boom. Now it was on reading lists and things like that. So those are the two things that I would do if I was self-publishing a book. But more importantly, I would lower my expectations of a book. I would only write the book I want to write. I wouldn't write the book to be an expert on something. I hate that. I hate people who wait. When I pick up someone's book and it's a complete fucking waste of time because it's just a book that they regurgitated other people's shit, and it's because they need a calling card and they want to have credibility. I feel really kind of violated that I wasted my time. But if you have something to say, then write it, right, and put it out there as a gift to the world. Tej is great. When he talks about create and then let it go out into the world and have a life that it's supposed to have. And that's how I do everything now. Although I do have a marketing team now, so you will see in the next year a lot more.
Well, that's always a good thing. And when the interesting thing about creation to me is that when you create something, you create it, it's yours, and then you release it out into the world, and then it could be something completely different than what you intended. Do you know what I mean? And that's something that's very difficult for anyone who's creating to get around. Have you thought about that at all, or?
Yeah, no, I've changed everything completely. So the only way I can write in Only Tens 2.0, I don't remember writing half the shit I wrote. Because what I did was I actually wrote on my meditation cushion. I had my prayer beads. I had a specific pair of reading glasses. Your audience might not know about reading glasses, but eventually you'll need them. And I got into a state so that whatever was to be written would come out. So I wrote Stream of Consciousness on my meditation cushion, every day for 6 months. And then what was, I just wanted to court the muse, as Stephen Pressfield would say. I wanted what wanted to be created and get out of the way. Mark isn't that smart. Mark isn't that articulate. Mark has really, really bad grammar. But then, the next book and the stuff that I'm writing, I am as surprised and as delighted with it as anybody who reads it, because I'm like, where the fuck did this come from? And it's because I get into that state and let what wants to be created.
It's so fascinating because you hear so many different creators in so many different realms talk about this idea that what is created isn't, you can't give yourself credit for it because you sometimes have no idea where it comes from. You don't know how many people influence that thought. And you realize, wow, what I am saying right now is the result of 25 years, which I didn't even control, any of those things happening, like me being born and me having the ability to create a podcast. Like, this is all outside of my control. So to give Danny Miranda credit for anything is silly. And it humbles you, right? Like, it humbles the creator to realize, holy shit, I didn't do any of this. This all came to be. I'm so grateful to experience this, but it wasn't me who created it.
Exactly. But that also helps on the flip side when something fails to go, okay, this didn't need to be created. This didn't want to be created, or, it did what it was supposed to do. It reached that one person it was supposed to reach. It takes a lot of the pressure off of having, what does success look like? What does it have to be? Because I have no idea. I never knew at 58 that I'd be sitting here on a podcast with you, talking about how successful I am at building a coaching practice and a podcast and books and shit like that. Like, who the fuck knew? I just followed it and trusted.
So going back to your writing practice, is it always sitting on the meditation cushion? Is it something you do elsewhere, or is it strictly?
No, now it is now strategic. It doesn't have to be on a again. Remember, if we started from the beginning, I don't want to have a religion about anything that I do, but I do make sure that I get into the state. I do make sure that I drop down and don't force anything. Because again, it's too stressful for me to want to write something that's pithy and smart. I'm not that articulate. So I kind of let things happen. It's really interesting because my publisher is going through the 250 episodes of the podcast, and they're writing a book out of it, and they're taking out markisms. That there's a bunch of markisms. I'm like, there's markisms? They're like, oh my God, you say shit that just has to be written down. I'm like, I have no idea. People say in my coaching sessions, you said such and such to me, and I was so pissed off, but it was so right. And I'm like, when did I say that? I don't remember saying that. So, when you can get out of the way, and I think all of my success has come from me getting out of my own way.
What is the best way to get out of your own way? Is it to sit down and meditation practice? Is it to what's the best way?
The best way is the way that you'll do. Just like the best meditation is the meditation that you'll do. For me, the best way is putting in some sort of contemplation practice. So for me, it's meditation. Then it's also journaling. There was a book called The Artist Way back in the 90s, and this thing called morning pages, where you write 3 pages, about 20 minutes every day. And for me, that was a way of tapping in. The first page was always me complaining about life or complaining about myself. Second page was a little more emotionally intelligent, a little more interesting. And then the third page was God talking to me. So I teach people to journal that way. And then so for me, any of this contemplation is a homing device. It's a way to find that place. So if you meditate and you have a shitty meditation, what you call a shitty meditation, you chatter, and you do it for a week and you get chatter, but then one day you get into a place where all of a sudden your thoughts slow down and you're connected to something bigger, something deeper. That's cool. Then you have a whole other week of chatter, but then you get back to that place. And then more often than not, you're able to get back to that place. Now you're able to go walk into a room full of people. So for me, when I walked into a room full of people, I would get really self-conscious. I'm a rabid introvert. I don't like groups of people. I like being on stage, but I don't like being in a group of people. My voice would get really high and I would talk fast and all that. And then I started, before I walked into a room, I would take a deep breath in my gut, right? Get down back into that state. And then I'd walk in and I'd be more interested in people. I would talk slower. My voice would be deeper and I'd be able to connect with people. So I was able to get into that state before I walked into a room, which would normally, make me nervous. So from the meditation cushion, from journaling, I can now bring it into other places and I can practice it. So I mentioned that client in New York who I have breathing, 1 minute a day. His next assignment, this assignment he's in the middle now, is whenever he walks into a meeting to take that deep breath and drop down into his belly, because the criticism of him was that he talks too much, to be an executive. So he says, so are you going to help me with that? I said, no, I'm not going to help you with talking less. I'm going to help you to be the person in the room who doesn't need to talk for no reason. So I have him drop down so that he doesn't have to worry about what he's saying. He can be the person who will speak when he needs to speak.
It's powerful. That's incredibly powerful. And it just starts with the practice of breathing. It's incredible how that could make such a big impact on someone and really.
And I'm not a breath teacher. Like I don't teach breathing. I don't I don't teach Wim Hof and fire breathing and all this shit. I just teach people to drop down and breathe from their belly. And they're like, holy shit, that changes everything. I'm like, right. It's so simple.
Yeah, no. And it's amazing because it's just something that's available to us all in this moment. It's available. And it's what really changed my mind about breathing, or when it really enlightened me, was when I realized, oh my God, this is one of the things that we do. I didn't realize this, but we do this unconsciously, and we could do this consciously as well. It's one of the few activities. And when I read that, I don't remember where, I was like, oh my God, that's incredible. Because a lot of activities we're either doing consciously or we're doing completely unconsciously. But breathing is one that we could have control over it. So, yeah, super important. So, for researching this conversation, I found a tweet from you that was a response to Naval, and I really wanted you to expand on it because I didn't really get it, and I would love to hear your perspective on it. You have this equation.
Okay.
It says responsibility equals proximity plus ability plus inclination. What does this mean exactly, and how could you explain it to someone who's not at Naval's level of intellect?
So that is not mine. That is Sadhguru. And in a later tweet, I got into a couple, and I gave him credit for that. So in Sadhguru's book called Inner Engineering, he started saying a new definition of responsibility, and the definition of responsibility is the ability to respond. So the truth is, we're responding to everything all day, every day. The tree that's outside our window, we're responding. We're breathing the air, right? The animal that's in the light that's on your desk, you're responding. You have a response to that thing that's in your world. So you can respond to anything. You eat a banana, it becomes you, right? So you're responding to the banana. So we have the ability to respond. Now, when you take that with proximity, so to respond, let's say someone's in a burning building, but they're in Chicago and you're in New York and you're just watching it on TV. You are not in proximity to help them. You are not in proximity to act, right? So it's your responsibility to respond, maybe call 911, maybe do whatever you can do, right? Now let's say you're there, you're right outside the building, but you're in a wheelchair and there's someone on the second floor, right? Your ability to respond because of your inability to walk up the stairs is limited. So now all you can do is, again, yell for help, call 911, whatever you can do. So proximity, ability, and then inclination. Do you feel like doing anything? You would feel a responsibility if you're near the burning building. There's no firemen in sight. You see a child on the second floor, right? So you do have the inclination to go help. Some people have the inclination to go help starving babies. Other people want to fix the dolphins being clubbed in the cove in Japan. My inclination is to help the people in the 1% who are dying and don't know that they wanted life, right? So what is your inclination? Now, what Sadhguru also says is there's a problem, because if you have the proximity and you have the ability and you decide not to do anything, then there's an internal problem there. But that's the explanation of responsibility. And for me, it just relaxed me because I feel responsible for everything in the world. I want to fix everything. I want to stop suffering. I want to help the dolphins that are in the cove in Japan. But now with this definition, it's like, oh, so I can handle what I can handle.
It almost reminds me of just being able to control what you can control. You know, you can't control the dolphins in Japan, but you can control your reaction in this moment. You can control what's in front of you. You can control doing the best you possibly can in what you have in front of you, but you can't control that situation that hasn't presented itself yet.
Sure, and let's talk about inclination though. You know, I really care about the dolphins in that cove, but I haven't decided to leave my post here, and you know, as a dad or as in my job, to go fly to Japan with the crew that helps stop it every year, right? So I can send a donation, right? So there's all kinds of things I can do. My inclination is to let God take care of that, and I'm going to take care of the things that He seems to have put in front of me.
I really enjoy that. I think that's a great way to view the world and a great way to center yourself if you find and think, oh my God, there's so many problems in the world, and there are. And it's so fascinating because we've never, in human history really, we have the misfortune or the fortune, depending on which way you look at it, of being able to see all the problems everywhere. Very few humans have been able to see all the problems everywhere. They just were dealing with what was in front of them in that moment. So it's a blessing to know all the injustices because then you can help fix them, but it's also a curse because it's very easy to feel overwhelmed when you see everything wrong going on in the world.
Yeah, and that goes back to why I think everybody's in a little bit of fight or flight right now, or maybe a lot bit of fight or flight. Their allostatic load, that baseline stress level, is so high. None of us are at our best right now. It's no wonder we're being torn apart. We're just sitting ducks for anybody who wants to incite differences, and so that fight or flight and being just not at our best is fuel for what's going on right now. So yeah, I think that's what's happening to almost all of us.
When you notice yourself getting that fight or flight, what do you do in that situation?
First thing is I breathe. It's funny because I did a podcast, the 6 questions you should ask yourself when you're triggered. And one of, is what's true? How am I scaring myself? Like, what am I making up about this situation that's not true? What do I want to create right now? So like if I'm going into an argument with someone who I know I'm scared because I know we're going to have a confrontation, before I go in, what do I want to create in this situation? Oh, do I want to create winning? Do I want to create making them feel bad and know how they hurt me? Or do I want to create relationship and connection? And I make that decision before I go in. So asking these questions of myself and getting, some semblance of emotional intelligence. And I have to unwind myself quite a bit, because I get triggered by politics. I get triggered by people being hurt. I get triggered all the time. I get triggered on Twitter from just people who are just bullshit spouting all this stuff that's supposed to be intelligent and wise, and they're held up when they have 600 million followers. And I'm like, it's just bullshit. Holy shit. I get triggered. And then I have to go back to my cushion and my pen and paper and go, where am I full shit? Where am I, why am I triggered by this? Why can't I just let them be them? Right. So that's how I deal with it.
You mentioned the word create there, and I thought you were talking about it in a different sense. Because when we are triggered and when we are in that fight or flight, it can sometimes bring about the best creations. I think sometimes we have a feeling that we need to suppress our negative emotions or suppress the fight or flight. But what if we use that to create something? That could create a beautiful piece of art or a beautiful piece of writing. And it's something to consider, I think.
So again, anytime I spout a truth, I already know I'm lying. So like the truth is, I'd love to get out of fight or flight, get into a more creative space and in more flow and create from there, right? But then I know when my back was to the wall and I was freaked out, I created money at one time. Like so there's always an exception to the rule. There's always 2 sides to the same coin. That's why I think a truth today for me might not be a truth tomorrow. A self-help book for today is poison for one person and gold for another, right? One person may need to set boundaries for their spiritual growth, and another person may need to let go of their boundaries for their spiritual growth. Like, who the fuck knows what works for you? You got to figure out your own
I think
life.
that's why when people recommend books, it can be troubling. And it's something when people ask me for book recommendations, what I like to do is I like to point them to a lot of books that I've read and have reviewed and say, what sticks out to you? What is interesting to you? Because if you blindly recommend something to someone, it could be the completely wrong book for their situation. And it's such an important point about figuring out what is the book for you, or what is the resource for you. And only you know that, and only you will be able to figure that out. And if you choose wrong, that's okay too.
Oh, always. And one of the reasons why I read so many books and only read a third of so many books. like that's a cool thing to be able to put down a book and go, this just isn't for me today. And I've put down books that's just not for me today, and then picked them up years later and gone, holy shit, this is profound. But I couldn't get it.
I've mentioned before that The Power of Now was exactly that for me with Eckhart Tolle. Where I read that 3 years ago in college, and I was like, what is this nonsense? And then you read it I've read in the past 12 months, and I was like, oh my God, this is so profound. This is incredible. And it's like, it really is just figuring out what's the right book for you and just giving everything a shot.
Yeah. For me, though, I will say the universal thing I think most people should have is a pen and paper. I think journaling is universally one of the smartest things. Not journaling on a keyboard, actually pen and paper, I think is one of the most useful tools we still have.
Do you ever find yourself, what have been some of your key insights that you could share from your journaling in the past, 5 years? Because when people journal, they unlock something that is like viewing yourself in third person. I'd love to hear some of the things you've learned from that.
So, it's so funny because I can't remember what came in meditation, what came in journaling. I keep a back of a notebook that I call page 3 wisdom. When something comes, an insight comes on page 3 after 3 pages of writing, and I keep that. I throw everything else away and I keep that. And I'm trying to remember, but I remember one really profound thing that I know wasn't me. Is I was writing. I was either writing or meditating. I can't remember which it was. And I think I was writing, thank you, God. Thank you for letting me do what I do for a living in spite of all my shortcomings, in spite of my fuck-ups my whole entire life, in spite of all that. Thank you for choosing me to do this. I'm so blessed. And as loud could be was this voice that said, I chose you because of your shortcomings. I chose you because of your fuck-ups. And that wasn't me. That kind of thing is what happens when you listen, right? And it's an aspect of me, right? I don't think God with the white beard came down and talked to me that way. An aspect of life just said, no, this is your gold. The fact that you were homeless, the fact that you were a drug addict, the fact that you struggle with time management is gold for people. So that really helped me to be able to be out in the world and talk about what I talk about.
It allows me to transition to a quote that you highlighted that I wanted to bring up, which relates to it perfectly of what you just talked about, is by Kapil Gupta, I believe his name is. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce it.
Yeah, who I've...
Did you really?
I read all 3 of his books. I followed him. I was profound. And then he said something that was so profoundly, horribly egoic that I just was like, yeah.
Okay, well, let's talk about this quote in particular, and we could forget about...
I am the most... You have helped me be the most... unfiltered I have ever been on my own podcast or anybody else. I am just saying whatever the fuck.
Good. It's your life. It's your podcast. We're just in it. So the quote is, if you were for a single moment able to see these problems for what they truly were, every one of them would vanish before your next breath. This is a beautiful quote.
It is a beautiful quote.
And you highlighted it. So talk a little bit about it.
I highlighted it for what? All right. So what I profoundly got from that was there are no problems. There only is. Anytime I dive into anything, it dissipates, is what I got from that.
And yeah, it makes me think of what you were just talking about, which is just your shortcomings, your own perceived shortcomings and problems were actually things that were served to benefit you as well.
Always. Again, I was asked on a podcast, someone says, so if you could go back and change something from 20-year-old Mark, what would you change? I'm like, not a fucking thing. I mean, there are some things that I could really use to change with my health, with finances, with things like that. Like I wouldn't have sold Tesla at 60. If I would have changed one iota of one thing, would I have the sons that I have? Would I have the life that I have? Would I have made the impact on the people who come to me in tears and say, when you said that to me 2 years ago, it changed everything. When someone comes and says, I wouldn't coach him. A guy came to me once and he wanted me to coach him. He was had a check. He was ready. And I said, I'm not going to coach you. You're a drunk. And he says, what? I said, you're a drunk. I love you. You're amazing. But you're a drunk, so I can't coach you. And then he sends me a video 6 months later, says, I haven't had a drink in 6 months since that conversation. Wow. Like that could just break you down. Shit, that'll break me down in tears right now. Like, why would I change anything that I have lived with? Because I couldn't spot that he was a drunk if I wasn't a drunk, right?
Mm-hmm. That's powerful.
And I couldn't say it with love. I couldn't say it with love and not judgment. Like, if I said it with judgment, he wouldn't have heard me. I said it with absolute love.
That's powerful, man. And it's powerful. What you just said reminds me of the importance of coming at conversations with love instead of judgment, and coming at things just, if you're coming at it with love, it doesn't matter what you say, because you're trying to benefit the other person at the end of the day. Yeah,
I used to rant. When I get interviewed on coach podcasts, they ask me about what are the ingredients to a good coach and all that, and I said, look, this coaching thing is fucking sacred. I said, this whole Tony Robbins confronting people and confronting their bullshit and all that stuff is really good if if it's done with love. You have to remember, when you're coaching someone, when you're confronting someone, you're holding their soul, their heart in your hands. So you only confront them if you have love and have a vision for them on the other side. To be sharp and to be able to call out people's bullshit, that's an easy parlor trick. To actually be able to confront someone so that they can see something for themselves and break free is a completely different thing. So I get really mad at coaches who are just so good at slashing people to bits because they've been trained to see bullshit. Unless you come to coaching with absolute, I won't coach anybody that I don't fall in love with. I do free sessions at first. I find out, do I see who they could be? Do I see who they are? Do I fall in love with them? If I don't, I send them someplace else, because I don't believe I should ever coach someone I don't fall in love with.
Is that difficult for you? Because that sounds like,
sometimes I like the check. Sometimes I need the check.
Right. So you just.
But I still have not said yes to anybody who I didn't want to coach.
Well, that speaks to your ability to sleep with yourself at night, right? To look in yourself in the mirror and be like, oh, okay, I did what I was supposed to do.
Hopefully, yeah. I feel pretty good about the integrity of the people that I've taken on. Yeah.
Well, Mark, it's been such a pleasure talking to you and such a pleasure having this conversation. This hour's flown by. Do you have any final pieces of parting wisdom? I love to ask this to guests, and I know you have a lot of wisdom in you, so I would love to hear some final pieces.
It's like asking a comedian to be
right?
funny on demand, right? Hey, be wise. Be wise as people leave the podcast.
Yeah, give them something to really give themselves. Be like, oh yeah, that Mark guy, he's a legend.
So what? Actually, I'll tell you. The thing that I really want to impart to people is that we are free. What I never knew my whole entire life was that I was free to make choices. That I was, that other people's expectations, that my own belief systems, that society, all dictated, that morals, that whatever dictated I act, be, do a certain way, that we're all free. And that the people come to me and say, I want to know my purpose. What's my purpose in life? What's my mission? Well, your fucking purpose is to live. What do you want to do? Go find out what you want to do. Go out and find out what you care about, and then follow that. Now, you may need to chop wood and carry water, and you may need to get a job waiting tables, or you may need to be in that career in that office that you don't like for a little while, right? But the purpose is whatever it is that you're called to do. Now, if you can get quiet and contemplate and get to that place where you can hear that voice, then you can trust that voice. But we are free, and that's what I want people to understand. They're not chained to jobs. They're not chained to government. They're not chained to religion. They're not chained to their own beliefs. And it was hard fought. I'm freaking 58, right? It took me to my 50s to figure that out. Now, now guys like you are talking about it in your 20s, and it's just exquisite.
Well, I feel much wiser after hearing you speak, much wiser after hearing you say those words. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, truly.
I did it. I was wise on the man. I love
it. And tell everyone where they could find more of you, and I'm sure they do.
So if you go to markjsilverman.com, Mark the letter J Silverman.com, everything's there. You can find my book, the podcast, group programs, although most of your people won't be old enough to be a part of my group programs. And the next book, all that
awesome
stuff.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll be able to do this again sometime soon.
Hey, thank you, Danny. I really appreciate it.
Beautiful people, that was my episode with Mark J. Silverman. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your time and attention. If you would like to give me feedback for this episode, @HeyDannyMiranda is the best place to do it, and I look forward to hearing from you. Peace.